The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and regret. But Zachary Kane's heart raced with a secret heavier than the foredrip in his arm. At 28, he was a ghost in his own life, disowned by his family for loving a man. Yet he'd spent the last of his savings to erase their debts. Now, with cancer carving its cruel path through his body, he wondered if they'd ever know or care. Zachary leaned back against the stiff hospital pillow, his green eyes tracing the cracks in the ceiling of St. Joseph's Medical Center in Seattle. The city buzzed beyond the window, a vibrant pulse of life he could no longer fully claim. He'd built a successful career as a freelance graphic designer, crafting visuals for tech startups that paid handsomely. But none of it mattered now. Now when every breath felt borrowed. His phone lay silent on the bedside table. No calls. No texts. Not even from his parents, who'd slammed the door on him 3 years ago when he came out. The memory stung like a fresh wound. He'd driven to his childhood home in Tacoma, a modest 2-story house with peeling paint, hoping to bridge the gap. His mother, Illn, had stood rigid in the doorway, her face a mask of disappointment. "You're choosing this sin over us," she'd said, her voice cold as the February rain soaking his jacket. His father, Richard, hadn't even looked up from the TV. That night, Zachary had cried alone in his car, the weight of their rejection heavier than any diagnosis. But love, stubborn and unyielding, had found him anyway. Ethan Caldwell, a 29-year-old barista and aspiring poet, had entered Zachary's life like a burst of sunlight through Seattle's perpetual gray. They'd met at a queer poetry slam in Capitol Hill, where Ethan's words, raw, vulnerable, and laced with hope, had left Zachary breathless. Ethan was everything his parents despised: openly gay, unapologetic, and fiercely kind. Their first date, a late-night walk along Alki Beach, had ended with a kiss that felt like a promise. Now, Ethan was the only one who knew about Zachary's illness, the only one who held his hand through the nausea and fear. "Zach, you don't have to do this alone," Ethan had said last night, his brown eyes glistening as he sat by the hospital bed. He'd worn that gray sweater Zachary loved, the one that hugged his broad shoulders just right. "Let me tell someone. Your friends, your colleagues, hell, even your parents. They should know." Zachary had shaken his head, his voice barely above a whisper. "They made their choice. I don't want their pity now." But what he didn't say was that he'd already made a choice of his own. Months ago, when the doctors first found the tumor, he'd liquidated his savings, every cent from late-night design gigs and side hustles, to pay off his parents' mortgage. It was a quiet act of love, mailed anonymously through a lawyer, ensuring they'd never know it was him. He didn't want their gratitude. He just wanted them to be free. The hospital door creaked open, pulling Zachary from his thoughts. Dr. Patel, a kind-faced woman with a clipboard, stepped in. "Your latest scans are back," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "The cancer spread to your lymph nodes. We could try another round of chemo." But she hesitated, and Zachary knew what came next. Time was slipping faster than he'd planned. He nodded, forcing a smile. "How long?" "6 months. Maybe less," she said. "I'm sorry, Zachary." He thanked her, his voice steady despite the storm inside. When she left, he reached for his sketchbook, a habit that grounded him. His fingers, weaker now, traced the outlines of a design he'd been working on, a logo for a local LGBTQ plus youth center. It was his last project, a gift to the community that had become his family when his own had turned away. Ethan returned that evening, carrying a paper bag of takeout from their favorite Thai place. Pad CEW. Extra spicy, he said, setting it on the tray table with a grin. You need to eat something that isn't hospital jello. Zachary laughed, a sound that felt foreign in his throat. You gonna make me cry over noodles now? Only if they're that good, Ethan teased. But his eyes betrayed his worry. They ate in silence, the weight of unspoken truths hanging between them. Zachary wanted to tell Ethan about the mortgage, about the letter he'd written to his parents, sealed and ready to be mailed after he was gone. But he didn't. Instead, he reached for Ethan's hand, their fingers intertwining like they had on that beach 2 years ago. I love you, Zachary said, the words raw and unguarded. Ethan's grip tightened. I love you too. Always. As night fell, Zachary stared out the window at Seattle's skyline, the Space Needle glowing faintly in the distance. He thought of his parents, of the house now free of debt, of the life he'd built despite their rejection. He wasn't sure if love could heal the past, but he hoped it could leave something behind, a quiet legacy, a whisper of redemption in a world that had tried to break him. Zachary's days began to blur, each one a fragile thread in the tapestry of his remaining time. The hospital became his temporary home, its sterile walls a stark contrast to the vibrant life he'd once led. Yet, even as his body weakened, his resolve grew stronger to leave something meaningful behind, to prove that love could outlast pain. Ethan was his anchor, visiting daily with books, sketches, and stories to keep Zachary's spirits afloat. One afternoon, as rain streaked the hospital window, Ethan pulled out a worn notebook. I wrote something for you, he said, his voice soft. He read a poem about two souls tethered by starlight, defying the dark. Zachary's chest ached, not from the cancer, but from the overwhelming beauty of Ethan's words. You're too good for me, Zachary murmured, half joking, but Ethan's eyes darkened. Don't say that, he said. You're the strongest person I know. He leaned in, pressing a kiss to Zachary's forehead. And for a moment, the hospital room felt like a sanctuary. But the past wasn't done with Zachary. A week later, a letter arrived at the hospital, forwarded from his old apartment. The handwriting was unmistakable, his mother's. His heart thudded as he opened it, expecting another sermon about salvation. Instead, it was a single page, her words shaky and uncertain. We got a notice from the bank. The house is paid off. Did you do this? No signature, no warmth, just a question that carried the weight of their fracture bond. Zachary stared at the letter, his fingers trembling. He hadn't expected them to trace it back to him. The lawyer had promised anonymity, but somehow, they guessed. He didn't know whether to feel relieved or exposed. Ethan, sitting beside him, noticed his silence. What's wrong? He asked, concern etching his face. Zachary handed him the letter. Ethan read it, his jaw tightening. They don't deserve you, he said finally. Not after what they did. Maybe, Zachary said, his voice barely audible. But I didn't do it for them to deserve me. I did it because they're still my parents. Ethan's expression softened. and he pulled Zachary into a gentle embrace. "You're too good for this world, Zach." The conversation lingered in Zachary's mind as he drifted into an uneasy sleep that night. Dreams carried him back to Tacoma, to the summer he was 16, when his father taught him to ride a bike in the driveway. Back then, love had been uncomplicated, a given. Now, it was a battlefield, and he was losing ground. The next morning, Zachary made a decision. He asked Ethan to drive him to the youth center where he'd been volunteering remotely. The center, a colorful haven in the heart of Seattle, was a lifeline for queer teens who'd faced rejection like he had. He wanted to see it one last time, to ensure his final design, a mural of interwoven hands, symbolizing unity, was complete. The drive was quiet, the city a blur of gray and green. Ethan parked outside the center, and Zachary stepped out, leaning on a cane for support. Inside, the teens greeted him with hugs and smiles, unaware of his illness. Their energy was a balm, reminding him why he'd poured his heart into this place. The mural, vibrant and bold, covered an entire wall, and Zachary's chest swelled with pride. "You did this," Ethan said, standing beside him. "You gave them hope." Zachary nodded, but his thoughts drifted to the letter. He wondered if his parents would ever understand the man he'd become, not just their son, but a person who chose love over resentment. As he and Ethan left the center, the weight of his secret pressed harder. He hadn't told Ethan about the letter he'd written, the one meant for his parents after his death. It explained everything: the mortgage, his illness, his love for them despite their rejection. He wasn't ready to share it yet, not when Ethan's presence made him want to fight for one more day. Back at the hospital, Zachary's condition worsened. Dr. Patel adjusted his treatment, but the side effects were brutal: nausea, fatigue, and a fog that clouded his thoughts. Still, he worked on his sketches, determined to finish the youth center's logo. Ethan stayed by his side, reading poetry or humming softly, filling the room with warmth. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Zachary turned to Ethan. "If I don't make it," he said, his voice steady despite the fear, "promise me you'll keep going. Keep writing, keep loving, keep being you." Ethan's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. "Only if you promise to fight as long as you can." Zachary squeezed his hand, a silent vow. The future was uncertain, but in that moment, love was enough. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a constant reminder of a life Zachary was slipping away from. Each day felt like a negotiation with time, but he clung to the moments with Ethan, their love a defiance against the inevitable. Yet, the letter from his mother gnawed at him, a crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. Zachary hadn't responded to her. He wasn't sure he could. What words could bridge 3 years of silence, of prayers for his redemption that felt like knives? Instead, he poured his energy into the youth center, finalizing the logo from his hospital bed. The design was simple yet powerful, a rainbow of hands clasped together, encircled by the words, "You are enough." He emailed it to the center's director, feeling a quiet satisfaction that his work would outlive him. Ethan noticed a shift in Zachary's mood. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he said one afternoon, setting a cup of chamomile tea on the tray table. His brown eyes searched Zachary's face, catching the shadows beneath them. "You need to rest. I need to finish this, Zachary said, his voice firm but tired. It's all I've got left to give. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his hand resting on Zachary's. You've given enough. More than enough. His voice broke, and Zachary saw the fear Ethan tried to hide, the fear of losing him. That night, Zachary dreamed of his parents' house, the porch light glowing like a beacon. In the dream, he knocked, and his mother opened the door, her face soft with regret. But when he woke, the hospital room was dark, and Ethan was asleep in the chair beside him, his head resting on his arms. Zachary reached out, brushing a lock of chestnut hair from Ethan's forehead, and whispered, "I'm sorry I can't stay." The next day brought an unexpected visitor. Sarah, a volunteer from the youth center, arrived with a stack of letters from the teens. "They wanted you to know what you mean to them," she said, her voice warm. Zachary opened the first letter, written in shaky handwriting. "You show me I don't have to hide who I am." "Thank you, Zach." Tears stung his eyes as he read more, each one a testament to the impact he'd made. Sarah lingered, her expression hesitant. "There's something else," she said. "A couple came by the center yesterday, asking about you. They said they were your parents." Zachary's breath caught. "What did they want?" "They saw the mural," Sarah said. "They asked if you designed it." I didn't know what to say, so I just told them you're a big part of our community. He nodded, his mind racing. Had the mortgage payment sparked something in them, or was it guilt, curiosity, or something else entirely? He wasn't ready to face them, not when his body was failing and his emotions were raw. After Sarah left, Ethan woke from a nap and noticed Zachary's unease. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice gentle but insistent. Zachary told him about his parents' visit to the center. Ethan's face hardened. "They don't get a waltz back in now. Not after abandoning you." "I know," Zachary said, but his voice wavered. I keep wondering if they'd care if they knew I was dying." Ethan's eyes softened, and he pulled Zachary into a hug. "You don't owe them anything. But if you want to see them, I'll be right here." Zachary didn't decide right away. Instead, he asked Ethan to take him to the waterfront, a place they'd often visited together. The outing was risky, his strength was fading, but Ethan arranged a wheelchair and bundled him in a warm jacket. The Seattle air was crisp, the scent of salt and pine filling Zachary's lungs as they watched ferries glide across Puget Sound. "I used to dream of us living here forever," Zachary said, his voice barely audible over the waves. "A little house, your poetry books on the shelves, my sketches on the walls." Ethan smiled, though his eyes glistened. "We still can. In every way that matters." They sat in silence, hands clasped, as the sun sank into the horizon. Zachary felt the weight of his illness, but also the lightness of love. He didn't know if he'd see his parents again, but he knew he'd leave the world with no regrets for loving Ethan. As they returned to the hospital, Zachary made a silent vow to finish his letter to his parents, not for them, but for himself, to say the things he'd held back too long. The hospital room felt smaller each day, as if the walls were closing in with Zachary's dwindling time. His sketchbook lay open on his lap, filled with half-finished drawings, but his hands trembled too much to hold a pencil steady. Still, he clung to the moments with Ethan, their love a lifeline in the storm of his illness. Ethan had started reading to him from a collection of queer poetry, his voice a soothing rhythm against the beeping monitors. One evening, as he read a line about love outlasting time. Zachary interrupted. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice hoarse. "I wrote a letter to my parents. It's in my bag. If I don't make it, I want you to send it." Ethan's face fell, but he nodded. "What does it say?" "Everything I couldn't say when they kicked me out," Zachary said. "Why I paid off their house. Why I still love them. Even now. And about the cancer." Ethan set the book down, his hands shaking. "You don't have to do this, Zach. You don't owe them an explanation." "I know," Zachary said. "But I need to let go. For me." The conversation was cut short by a knock at the door. To Zachary's shock, his mother stood there, clutching a purse like a shield. Ellen's face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, as if she'd been crying. Behind her, Richard lingered, his shoulders slumped. Zachary's heart pounded, a mix of anger and longing. "Zachary," Ellen said, her voice trembling. "Can we talk?" Ethan stood, his posture protective. "You okay with this?" he asked Zachary, his tone sharp. Zachary nodded, though his stomach churned. Ethan stepped outside, leaving the three of them in a silence thick with years of pain. Ellen sat first, her hands twisting in her lap. "We got the bank notice," she said. "We know it was you." Richard cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "Why didn't you tell us?" Zachary's laugh was bitter. "Would you have listened? You made it clear I wasn't your son anymore." Ellen flinched, tears spilling down her cheeks. "We were wrong," she whispered. "We didn't understand. We thought we could fix you." "There's nothing to fix," Zachary said, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "I'm still the same person you raised. I just love differently." Richard looked away, his jaw tight. "We saw your mural at that center. Those kids, they talked about you like you're some kind of hero." Zachary's throat tightened. "They're my family now. They accepted me when you didn't." The room fell silent again, the weight of their words hanging heavy. Ellen reached for his hand, but Zachary pulled back, not ready for her touch. "We don't deserve your forgiveness," she said. "But we're here. We want to try." Zachary didn't respond. He didn't know if he could trust their words, not after years of silence. But their presence stirred something in him, a flicker of hope, or maybe closure. When they left, promising to return, Ethan slipped back into the room, his eyes searching Zachary's face. "You okay?" he asked, sitting close. "I don't know," Zachary admitted. "I want to believe they've changed, but it hurts too much to hope." Ethan pulled him into a gentle embrace, and Zachary let himself sink into it. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. His parents visited again, bringing small tokens, a photo album from his childhood, a thermos of his mother's chicken soup. They were tentative steps, fragile and uncertain. But Zachary felt the cracks in his heart begin to shift. Meanwhile, his health declined. Dr. Patel warned that the cancer was advancing faster than expected. Zachary refused to let it define his days. He asked Ethan to bring his laptop, determined to finish one last project, a digital portfolio of his designs, a legacy for the youth center. Working through the pain, he poured his heart into it, each click and drag a small act of defiance. One night, as Ethan read to him, Zachary felt a sudden clarity. "I want to go home," he said. "Not here. Our place." Ethan hesitated, knowing the risks. but saw the determination in Zachary's eyes. They arranged for home hospice care, and the next day, Ethan drove him to their small apartment in Capitol Hill. The familiar scent of coffee and old books enveloped Zachary as he settled onto the couch, Ethan's arms around him. For the first time in weeks, he felt at peace. As they watched the city lights from their window, Zachary whispered, "Thank you for being my home." Ethan kissed his temple, his voice thick with emotion. Always, the apartment was a haven, its walls lined with memories of Zachary and Ethan's life together, framed sketches, a shelf of poetry books, a faded Polaroid from their first Pride parade. But the hospice nurse's visits were a stark reminder that time was slipping away. Zachary's strength faded, yet his spirit burned brighter, fueled by love and a need to make peace with his past. His parents' visits continued, each one a fragile step toward reconciliation. Illn brought stories of Zachary's childhood, her voice cracking as she recalled his first drawing, a clumsy sketch of their old dog, Max. Richard, still gruff, shared updates about the house, mentioning how they'd painted the porch with the money they no longer owed the bank. Zachary listened, his heart caught between resentment and longing. He hadn't forgiven them fully, but their efforts stirred something he thought he'd buried. Ethan remained his rock, organizing their days with quiet efficiency. He cooked simple meals, read poetry, and held Zachary through the nights when pain kept sleep at bay. One afternoon, as they sat on the balcony overlooking Capitol Hill, Zachary handed Ethan a USB drive. "My portfolio," he said, "for the youth center. Make sure they get it." Ethan's eyes glistened, but he nodded. "You're incredible. You know that." Zachary smiled weakly. "Just try to leave something good behind." The youth center organized a small event to unveil the mural and logo, insisting Zachary attend via video call. Too weak to leave the apartment, he watched from the couch, Ethan by his side, as the teens spoke about his impact. One boy, barely 16, said, "Zach showed me I could be proud of who I am." Tears streamed down Zachary's face, and Ethan squeezed his hand, whispering, "You did that." But the weight of his illness grew heavier. The hospice nurse increased his pain medication, and Zachary's lucid moments became precious. He spent them writing letters to the teens, a note to the center's director, and revisions to the letter for his parents. He wanted every word to matter, to carry the weight of his truth. One evening, Illn and Richard arrived unannounced, their faces etched with worry. "We heard you're home," Illn said, her voice trembling. "We needed to see you." Zachary, propped up on pillows, gestured for them to sit. The air was thick with unspoken words. Finally, he spoke, his voice weak but clear. "I paid off your house because I love you, even after everything. But I need you to know I'm not the son you wanted, and I'm okay with that. I'm proud of who I am." Illn sobbed, reaching for his hand. This time, he let her take it. Richard's eyes were red, his voice hoarse. "We were wrong, Zach. We're so sorry." Zachary nodded, too tired to say more. Their apologies couldn't erase the past, but they softened its edges. As they left, Illn promised to return the next day. Zachary watched them go, a strange peace settling over him. He turned to Ethan, who'd been silent, and said, "I think I'm ready to let go." Ethan's face crumpled, but he nodded, pulling Zachary close. They spent the night talking about their dreams, their love, the life they'd built in spite of the world's cruelty. Zachary felt lighter, as if the weight of his secrets had lifted. The next morning, the hospice nurse warned that Zachary's time was short. Ethan called the youth center, and a few teens came to say goodbye, their faces a mix of grief and gratitude. Zachary smiled, his voice barely a whisper. "Keep being brave," he told them. "You're enough." As evening fell, Zachary asked Ethan to read one last poem. The words washed over him, a melody of love and resilience. He closed his eyes, Ethan's hand in his, and felt the world fade. His last thought was of the mural, of hands clasped together, a symbol of the family he'd found and the love he'd given freely. Zachary's final days were a quiet symphony of love and closure. The apartment, once a place of laughter and late-night talks, now held a sacred stillness. Ethan never left his side, his presence a steady light in the gathering dark. The youth center held a memorial event the day after Zachary passed, unveiling his portfolio alongside the mural. The room was packed with teens, volunteers, and even a few of Zachary's old clients, all gathered to honor the man who'd given so much. Ethan stood at the front, his voice steady as he read Zachary's letter to the center, a call to keep supporting queer youth, to remind them they were enough. Tears fell freely, but so did smiles, as stories of Zachary's kindness filled the room. Ellen and Richard attended, their faces heavy with grief. Ethan handed them Zachary's letter, sealed as he'd requested. They read it in silence, Ellen's hands trembling as she traced her son's words. He'd written of his love for them, his forgiveness, and his hope that they'd find peace. He'd also written about Ethan, calling him the love of his life, and about the cancer that had taken him too soon. "I don't regret who I am," he'd written. "I hope you can love me for it someday." The letter broke something open in Ellen. She sobbed, clutching Richard's arm, and for the first time, they saw Zachary not as a disappointment, but as a son who'd loved fiercely despite their rejection. They stayed late at the center, listening to the teens, learning about the community Zachary had built. It was a beginning, fragile but real. Ethan struggled in the weeks that followed. Grief was a heavy cloak, but Zachary's memory kept him moving. He published a collection of poems dedicated to Zachary, each one a love letter to the man who'd changed his life. The youth center adopted Zachary's logo, and the mural became a beacon for queer kids across Seattle, a reminder that love could triumph over pain. Ellen and Richard began volunteering at the center, a quiet tribute to their son. They didn't erase the past, but they worked to build a future where no kid would feel the rejection Zachary had. It was their way of honoring him, of making amends for the years they'd lost. One evening, Ethan walked to Alki Beach, the place where he and Zachary had shared their first kiss. The waves crashed softly, the sky a canvas of stars. He carried Zachary's sketchbook, now filled with designs and notes that told the story of a life well lived. Ethan smiled, tears falling, and whispered, "You did it, Zach. You left love everywhere." The world moved on, but Zachary's legacy endured, in the paid-off mortgage that freed his parents, in the mural that inspired a community, in the love that Ethan carried forward. His life, though brief, was a testament to resilience, a quiet rebellion against a world that tried to dim his light. And in the end, he'd proven that love, given freely, could change everything.